In 2006, there was a movie called Braveheart. And Braveheart told the story of a legendary 13th century Scottish hero named William Wallace. And William Wallace in the movie was played by Mel Gibson. In the movie, Wallace rallies the Scottish against the English monarch after he had suffered some personal tragedy by the English soldiers. And Wallace gathers a group of amateur warriors that is stronger than any English army and defeated them. It is an action-packed movie. When I think of Braveheart, the movie, I think of the book of Joshua, and specifically Joshua the leader. I think Joshua was a guy that had a brave heart. The book of Joshua is one of my favorite Old Testament books. I love to study great leaders, and Joshua, in my opinion, was a great leader. In the book of Joshua, it records how Joshua led Israel in their journey to possess the promised land. In fact, the principles that are brought out and taught in the book of Joshua will apply to us today. They are timeless principles that apply to our life. And here's two of those principles. Just as Israel had a promise to believe, God gives us promises to believe for our own life. The Bible is full of promises, my friend, and God will drop a promise in our heart and challenge us to believe Him to fulfill it. And just as Israel had a destiny to fulfill, possessing the promised land, I believe God has a destiny for us to fulfill in and through Jesus Christ. So I hope that you will join me every Wednesday night for this brand new series from the book of Joshua. Let's jump right into it tonight. Joshua chapter 1, verse number 1. Now it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, Moses my servant is dead. Now therefore arise and cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, to the sons of Israel. So we know here that Moses has passed away, so God needed a new leader, and He chose the new leader. His name was Joshua. He was well known among the Israelites, and God had been preparing Joshua for many years to take this assignment, to step into these shoes. What we need to understand tonight, and maybe here's a principle we need to understand, God is always preparing us for what lies ahead. He is always developing our faith. He is always maturing our faith and our character. And anytime God develops us, it's a process. It's never just a one and done. God takes us through different seasons and different challenges in our life. And sometimes the process of development is difficult. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's frustrating. Here's my advice, and here's what I learned in my own life. Never waste your season. Never waste your season. Never dismiss or minimize your present experience. Even if your experience is a negative experience, even if you are in one of the worst seasons of your life, even if you're in a place you don't want to be, never dismiss that, never minimize that, because God will use that to develop you and I to get us into our destiny and get us into the next assignment. You see, life is a classroom. That's really what life is. Every day we wake up, there's something for us to learn. So I would suggest whatever season you're in, whatever set of circumstances you're facing, lean into it, my friend, and learn what you need to learn. So let's talk about Joshua here, some of the characteristics, and you'll see how God was preparing him. First of all, Joshua had been a slave in Egypt to Pharaoh. He was born in Egypt, which means he, like other Hebrews at that time, were under Pharaoh's domination, under Pharaoh's control. So as a slave in Egypt, he experienced difficulty. He experienced disappointment. He experienced frustration. He experienced pain in his life. God was preparing him many, many years before as a slave in Egypt. He was also one of the 12 spies. We know in Numbers chapter 13, verse number 16, these are the names of the men whom Moses sent out to spy out the land. But Moses called Hoshea the son of Nun, Joshua. Moses here changed his name from Hosea to Joshua. And that's important because the name Hoshea meant salvation, but Joshua meant Jehovah is salvation. Anytime there's a name change in the Bible, it's important. So remember, out of the 12 spies, of whom Joshua was one, it was only he and Caleb that came back after spying out the promised land with a good report. The other 10 spies were negative. The other 10 spies said, there's no way God can help us possess this land. But Joshua and Caleb said, no. If God is for us, who can be against us? So he was a slave in Egypt. He was one of the 12 spies, and he was battle-tested. We know that because in Exodus chapter 17, we're told that Joshua led God's army in defeating the Amalekites. So this again was part of the development process of Joshua. We know that Moses was the prophet and Joshua was the warrior. Can you see the thread? Can you see how before Joshua steps into the shoes of Moses to lead the people, that God was preparing him in the different seasons of his life? We also know that he was a servant. We read that in Exodus chapter 24, verse number 13. So Moses arose with Joshua, his servant, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. He was a servant, and throughout the book, before he assumed leadership, he was often referred to as the servant of Moses. Think about that. This is what he was called until he took the place of leadership. What does it mean to be a servant? A servant is one who is at the disposal of another person, one that is willing to do what another person needs them to do. He spent years serving God, listen to me, serving God by serving another man. He was a servant. I've learned in my life that you can never become a great leader until you become a faithful servant and follower. He was promoted to be the leader, but first he had to go through seasons of preparation as a slave, as one of the spies, as being battle-tested on the battlefield, and as serving Moses. In Numbers 27, God instructed Moses to appoint Joshua as his successor. So again, it's important for us to remember tonight that Joshua spent years being refined by the experiences of life. He learned humility. He learned faithfulness. He learned determination. He learned what it meant to follow the orders and the leadership of another person. Today, everybody wants to be a leader. Today, everybody wants a title. Everybody, wants to advance and take a position of authority. But the truth of the matter is, most people can't handle that responsibility. I mean, how many times do we hear stories of CEOs of great successful companies that maybe started in the mailroom or started all the way down on the food chain and worked themselves up to become the leader? Hey, listen, friend, leaders aren't born, leaders are developed. You have to develop into leadership. And the way you develop into leadership is you go through the experiences of life. And you understand that through every experience, you can learn something. It helps develop your character and your leadership skills that you can implement when you step into that position. There is a leader in all of us. A leader in all of us. Joshua was a servant. He was an everyday guy that developed into a generational leader. So on some scale, there's a leader inside of you. Maybe it's leading your family. Maybe it's leading your circle of friends. Maybe it's leading your team at work, or maybe it's leading a group in your church. Don't minimize where you are right now. Don't dismiss the season that you're in. Don't waste your pain. Don't waste your disappointment. Don't waste your frustrations. God is refining you and preparing you for what's next in your life. Man, this is going to be a great study in the book of Joshua, so I hope you'll join me every Wednesday night. And until next Wednesday, I'll look forward to seeing you Sunday, 9:15 or 11:15 right here in the big house.